of course, I can't know what your experience would be like because only you know what's going on in here. I just would encourage anybody watching to give that a shot and consider what is it like to be in your mind, and don't respond to that using English. So in my last video, I talked a little bit about this idea that if an alien were to come down and knock on your window and ask you a question, hey, tell me about that song you're listening to. What is that? You wouldn't be able to explain it for a number of reasons, mainly being this alien probably doesn't speak English, so he probably couldn't even ask you the question in the first place. But even assuming he could, there aren't really concepts to describe music to a creature that doesn't have ears or hasn't ever heard any sort of musical tune or instrument, right? And I think the main difficulty of that would be trying to articulate that through language. The only way that you're really able to understand what music is to hear it for yourself. And this kind of made me think of something else that I've been thinking of lately, which is when I sit down and think, those thoughts are in English, and I'll actually kind of have like a discourse usually between myself and this other self that isn't there, and we'll talk to each other. And I don't know at what point in time I kind of split into two people where we were able to communicate, but that's what happens. And what's interesting about that is, one, there's only one person, so I don't really know who I'm talking to when I do that, and I feel a little bit schizophrenic. And two, what is kind of my point of this video is that you're speaking to yourself in English, which probably doesn't sound strange to you, right? I mean, I grew up speaking English, that's how I learned about things, so if I'm going to speak to myself, it'll probably be in English, not, Korean. But I do think there's something strange about that. Of course, yeah, I'll never speak to myself in Mandarin in my head, but for example, I studied Spanish in high school, right? And sometimes I'll actually have dreams where segments or even the whole dream will take place in Spanish. When I wake up from that, I'm always like, that's so strange that I was able to do that. And what's strange about it is, am I thinking in Spanish in my dream? Am I thinking in English and then translating to Spanish? It just kind of shows that at a subconscious level, you're using language to communicate, right? And of course I'm using language to communicate between me and my friend or my family, but the relationship with yourself is very different from the relationship between you and your best friend. The reason I think it's so different is because you are the only person you can speak to without using language. I don't even know if speak would be the right term here, because you don't really speak to yourself. It's like I was saying earlier, that's implying there's two people, right? Am I thinking my thought before I think it, like, hey, go to the bathroom, or do I just have the urge to go? But why did I even bother to come up with the words, right? If I needed to tell somebody, the words are useful. But when it comes to myself, the words feel a little bit redundant. So I guess where I'm going with all this is I would encourage anybody watching this to take some time out of each day for the next little while and just sit there and do absolutely nothing. Don't even consider it meditating. Just sit there and just don't do anything, and watch as you start to talk to yourself in English. And when you do that, take a second to realize, who the hell am I talking to? And if you're truly sitting there alone doing nothing, you really are talking to nobody. If you can sit and realize that, at least what I've noticed for myself is every once in a while, those thoughts will, or at least the English words will kind of dissipate, and I'll realize there's still something left. My experience isn't limited to English words. When I see a door, I don't have to think the word door to see it and experience it. In those really instant moments where somebody might tackle you or something like that, you're not thinking, I'm being tackled. You get tackled. And I think there's something really special about the relationship that one has with themselves, because when you don't have to use English, you're not limited by like a box and the way that English words define the way you view the world. And if you can kind of even just a little bit slip past that in your mind and not give an English word to everything you're doing and thinking and saying and looking at and smelling, if you can slip through that and just kind of be aware of what's around you, there's this weird sensation of completeness. And I think over the long term, not using English when you speak to yourself, which Granted, I don't think speak is the right term. When you're by yourself, maybe on a hike, running on the treadmill, when you're in those quiet moments, notice that there's still an experience, and that experience doesn't need words. And even me trying to tell you about this sensation will never work because I have to use words to tell you it. Of course, I can't know what your experience would be like because only you know what's going on in here. And I just would encourage anybody watching to give that a shot and consider what is it like to be in your mind, and don't respond to that using English. Anyway, those are my thoughts. Peace out.